Long ago, in a time when the world was molded by the rule of kings and the authority of gods, there existed a land called Sidon. This city basked under an unrelenting sun that blazed across. Fields of purple-hued flowers swaying in the wind. The sea, vast and infinite, was more than just water. It was a mirror reflecting the presence of the gods themselves. It symbolized divine authority, watching silently over the land. It was in this magnificent city, where ocean and sky converged, that Jezebel was born. She was the daughter of King Ahab, heir to a kingdom forged in ancient traditions and unyielding power. Jezebel's birth marked, more than the arrival of royalty had heralded, the rise of a force unlike any other. Her father Ahab ruled over Sidon and Tyre with an iron grip. His name honored by some, feared by others. From childhood, Jezebel was not shaped into a mere courtly ornament like other princesses. Instead, she was groomed to become a commanding presence in her own right, a name destined to echo across time. While other girls were taught grace and diplomacy, Jezebel learned how to command power. She mastered the subtle art of politics, the manipulation of minds and hearts, and how to peer through the illusions that cloaked kingdoms in shadow. Her intelligence was razor-sharp, her instincts flawless. Jezebel didn't just play the game of influence. She understood that true dominance wasn't earned through birthright alone. It came from manipulation, control, and forging alliances. Above all, she knew that those who rose to the top were the ones who could bend others to their will, who could turn the improbable into the inevitable. Despite her royal status and the many suitors who sought her hand, Jezebel never allowed tradition or marriage to dictate her destiny. Yes, she would marry, but only to a man who would advance her ambitions. Her marriage would not be about love. It would be a calculated step toward ultimate control. As the years passed, whispers from the kingdom of Israel reached her ears. Israel, a fractured land ruled by King Ahab, a monarch who had inherited his father's throne but lacked the passion needed for greatness. Jezebel didn't see a king in Ahab. She saw an opportunity, a man searching for a foreign queen to bolster his reign, a man whose weakness made him malleable. To her, Ahab was not a partner but a means to power. His hunger for strength could be fed through her presence. Jezebel saw him as the key to extending her reach. Beyond Sidon, she wouldn't stand beside the king, she would rule through him. She was the fire, Ahab, a flickering candle waiting to be consumed. When the proposal for marriage arrived, Jezebel agreed without hesitation. But her acceptance wasn't out of affection, it was born of strategy. She left behind the warm shores of Sidon, crossed the seas, and carried with her the vision of a future shaped by her own hands. Her ship cut through the water like destiny itself had given the wind to her sails. Israel was a world apart from Sidon. Its people spoke in strange tongues, honored a foreign god, and followed unfamiliar customs. But Jezebel was undeterred. Her ambition was too great to be slowed by cultural differences. She had not come to assimilate. She had come to dominate, to rule not just in name, but in power. As the unseen architect of Israel's fate, upon her arrival, Jezebel was met with awe. She was a queen, unlike any other foreign, regal, radiant. Her beauty was not merely skin-deep, it radiated from her barren. Her gaze was icy and precise. Her smile hinted at authority. Yet, it would not be beauty that defined her reign, but her ruthless resolve and unwavering belief in her own destiny. She married Ahab, and together they ruled Israel. But the truth was, evident it was Jezebel who held the reins of command. Though king in title, Ahab lacked the strength to lead a divided kingdom. Jezebel filled the void with confidence. She didn't simply assist Ahab's rule, she reshaped it entirely. She began replacing his advisors with her own loyalists, erasing dissenting voices. Jezebel was determined to make Israel hers, not Ahab's, not Yahweh's, but hers alone. Her ambition, however, would come at a price. Jezebel's marriage to Ahab marked more than a political alliance, that heralded a transformation of Israel's spiritual foundation. She had not come merely as queen, she had come as a reformer and a conqueror, empowered by the gods of her homeland. One of her first acts as queen was the introduction of Baal worship, the Phoenician god of fertility, rain, and storms. But Baal was not Israel's God. The Israelites served Yahweh, a god Jezebel, neither acknowledged nor feared. She was resolute in her mission to bring her faith to Israel. She built altars to Baal, erected idols, and encouraged the people to abandon Yahweh. The priests of Yahweh were silenced. Those who dared to resist her found themselves erased. Jezebel ruled through terror, strategy, and an iron will. She had arrived not to be a figurehead, but the very center of power, and nothing, not even the God of Israel, would deter her. Within the palace halls, her strength grew. No longer just queen, Jezebel became a force unto herself. Israel would soon learn that to challenge her was to defy the very hand of fate. Each passing day saw her shadow stretch further across the land. Her power, her reach, her command continued to grow until the day arrived when Jezebel made an enemy, one who would threaten not just her authority, but her very existence. The winds of Israel began to shift. Once Jezebel had fully established her reign, it was no longer merely the influence of a queen at court. Jezebel's presence swept through the kingdom like a storm. With Ahab, her husband, a feeble and easily manipulated king, Jezebel stepped into the role of not just queen, but ruler. Her hands guided every decision. Her words shaped every action. If the kingdom was to be transformed, it would be according to her will, under Jezebel's direction. Israel's cultural fabric began to change in both subtle and dramatic ways. The sacred temples dedicated to Yahweh, the one true God of Israel, were replaced by towering altars built in honor of Baal, the Phoenician god of storms, fertility, and harvest. Jezebel's faith in Baal's supremacy never wavered. She believed that by turning Israel away from Yahweh, she could not only tighten her grip on power, but also bring prosperity to the nation by invoking favor from her gods. Jezebel, raised in Sidon, never viewed the worship of Yahweh as sacred. To her, it was a relic of the passed down obstacle to be torn down. So she began a calculated purge of Yahweh's worship, replacing it with her own. In doing so, she launched a spiritual revolution that would echo across history. With the grand temple of Baal rising in the heart of Samaria, Jezebel forced the people of Israel to bend to her will. The priesthood of Baal flourished under her leadership, and the royal court became a center of pagan worship and open sacrifice. Jezebel was more than a political leader. She controlled the spiritual identity of a nation. Yet, even with her growing influence, she faced resistance. Many still held fast to the old faith. The prophets of Yahweh, men devoted to the one true God, would not bow to her gods. And so began the greatest conflict of Jezebel's reign. Among these prophets stood Elijah, a man of immense courage and unwavering faith. Elijah was a constant thorn in Jezebel's side. His presence alone defied her authority. He led the movement that refused to be silenced. He was the one man in all of Israel brave enough to stand against her. For Jezebel, this was not just rebellion, it was personal. Elijah's defiance was a direct assault on her power and her purpose. Elijah's ministry was fierce. He called down fire from heaven, performed miracles, and denounced the corruption and idolatry consuming the kingdom. His message was clear: return to Yahweh or face judgment. Jezebel could not ignore him. His words stirred the hearts of the people and rekindled their faith. Yet Jezebel remained resolute. She vowed to silence him. In fury, she sent a messenger to Elijah, proclaiming, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Her anger blazed like wildfire. She would stop at nothing to destroy the prophet who defied. Though strong in faith, Elijah feared Jezebel's wrath and fled into the wilderness. He went, weary and afraid. But God had not abandoned him. He sent an angel to sustain him with food and drink, renewing Elijah's strength. In a quiet whisper, God spoke, commanding Elijah to return and continue his mission. With renewed purpose, Elijah returned to Israel. There, he challenged Jezebel and the prophets of Baal in a public trial, a fiery showdown on Mount Carmel, to reveal the one true God. Elijah called the people to gather at the mountain's base. Before the nation, he proposed a test of divine power. 2 altars were built, one to Baal, the other to Yahweh. The prophets of Baal, 450 strong, prayed, offered sacrifices, and cried out. But Baal was silent. Elijah taunted them. Perhaps their God was sleeping or away. Despite their frenzy, Baal did not answer. Then Elijah stepped forward. He prepared his altar and drenched it with water to ensure that fire could not catch by natural means. Then he prayed simply to Yahweh. Instantly, fire fell from the sky, consuming the sacrifice, the altar, and even the water. The miracle was undeniable. Yahweh alone was God. The people fell in awe before him. But Jezebel, blinded by rage and pride, would not yield. Instead of repenting, she sought revenge. The prophets of Baal were put to death, but the victory only stoked Jezebel's fury. Her heart remained hardened. The seeds of her own ruin had been planted. After Mount Carmel, her anger intensified. She would not allow humiliation to go unpunished. Once again, she sent word to Elijah. May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. This time, Elijah did not flee. He had seen the power of God and knew her threats were empty. Yet Jezebel's grip on Israel endured. The war between her and the prophets of Yahweh raged on. Her reign became one of blood and fire. Her enemies, both political and spiritual, were hunted and slain. Her thirst for power left a trail of death and terror in its wake. Defiance was met with execution. Control was her obsession. But quietly, in the background, a new generation was rising. One that would challenge her rule. One that would bring her down. We now turn to Jezebel's final chapter 2. The emotional weight of her reign, her ultimate downfall, and the lasting consequences of her actions. This ending will deliver a powerful and resonant conclusion to her tale. Every empire, no matter how mighty, eventually falls. Jezebel's end would not come by sword or army, but by the very forces she once commanded. Her reign founded on fear, manipulation, and false gods crumbled like the idols she forced Israel to worship. Jezebel had long believed she was invincible. From the moment she crossed the seas to Israel, she had shaped the kingdom to reflect her own vision. With beauty and cunning, she captured hearts. But through ruthless ambition, she ensnared the kingdom itself. She was more than a queen. She was a force of nature. Wherever she went, fear and reverence followed. Her name became a symbol of power, control, and domination. She twisted Israel's faith, silenced its prophets, and built a kingdom upon the bones of the innocent. But even forces of nature are bound by the laws of the universe, and Jezebel was no exception. For every kingdom, there comes a reckoning. For Jezebel, that reckoning arrived in the form of a new King Jehu. Once a soldier in King Ahab's army, Jehu was now destined to tear down the house of Ahab and end Jezebel's reign. It had been foretold long before that Jehu would bring Jezebel's empire of fear and idolatry, collapsing it like the walls of Jericho. The prophecy had echoed for generations. The dogs will eat Jezebel by the wall of Jericho. It was a word spoken by the prophet Elijah, and it would come to pass with terrifying precision. When Jehu entered Jezreel, the capital of Israel's northern kingdom, Jezebel knew the end had come. She had ruled with absolute power for so long, and yet now she stared into the abyss. Still, she would not go quietly. Jezebel would face her end with the same defiance that marked her rise. As Jehu's men advanced through the city, Jezebel remained calm in her palace, high above the streets in her royal chambers. From the window, she looked down on the army with a cold, unflinching heart. She had never been one to cower, and she would not start now. Jezebel was a queen, and she would die as one proud, regal, and defiant. She dressed in her finest robes, painted her face with the beauty that once enchanted kings, and gazed down at her enemies as though she still ruled over all. It was her final act of defiance, a message that even in death, she saw herself as queen. But Jehu was unmoved by her beauty, her elegance, or her pride. He ordered her to be thrown from the window. for there was no place in Israel for a queen who had led the people into sin. And so, the woman who once commanded armies and bent kings to her will was cast down. Jezebel's fall was swift. Her body struck the ground below, and the city stood in silence. Yet even in death, her story did not end. Just as Elijah had prophesied, dogs came and desecrated her body. They devoured her flesh and left behind only scattered bones. Her once glorious name faded into a whisperer, tragic symbol of a woman who tried to build an empire with sheer will, only to see it crumble into dust. Jezebel's death was more than the end of a queen. It was the death of an age. And with her fall came the beginning of Israel's return. The fall of Jezebel marked a turning point for the nation. Though her rule had scarred the land, her death opened a path for healing. Jehu's reign began with a purge cleansing of the idolatry Jezebel had imposed. He tore down the altars of Baal, shattered the idols once worshipped, and ordered the destruction of Baal's followers. Though the nation's return to Yahweh would take time, it had become inevitable. The idols crumbled. The corrupt priests were executed. Slowly, the people began to reclaim their faith. Jezebel's brutal fall marked the end of a dark spiritual chapter in Israel's history. Yet the cost of her reign had been high. Her rule left behind deep wounds, divisions, fear, and generations of people who had wandered from truth. The scars would take time to heal, and the people would never forget the price of allowing such a queen to rise. In the end, Jezebel's story serves as a timeless warning. Her ambition, her ruthlessness, and her rebellion against God led to her downfall. But her fall also carries a lesson. No one, not even the most powerful ruler, can escape the consequences of their actions. Jezebel's death was more than a queen's fall. It was the death of a vision that sought to reshape a kingdom in her image, to replace the worship of the true God with false idols. It was the fall of an empire built on fear, control, and innocent blood. And yet, Jezebel's story still echoes through time. It is a tale of pride and unchecked power, of what happens when a leader turns from divine truth to self-made gods. Her downfall reminds us that no one is beyond judgment, no empire immune to collapse, and that all will one day answer for their actions. Jezebel was not just a queen, she was a symbol, a warning against the dangers of power without reverence. Her story, though ending in darkness, leaves behind a message that shaped Israel's destiny for generations to come. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful tales from history, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Did you know we have an online store? It's called TheroYalaramnight.com. We offer a variety of clothing and home items. Explore our sweatshirts with different designs and colors, or visit our home section and check out our candles. Some read Shalom, others say, all praises to the Most High. If you don't see something you love yet, sign up for our email list to hear about new items. Grab your free Bible story coloring pages, and your email will be added to our list. Thank you for your support. It encourages us to keep creating content and merchandise to boldly share our faith. Shalom.